Gail Collins famously said of Tom, "Traveling the Middle East with Tom is like going to the mall with Britney Spears." He is a rock star. And I would add that across the whole world, Tom Friedman is a force for good. We can have little idea how broadly or how well this man represents the United States of America. So that St. Louis Park Echo Cub reporter, Tom Friedman.
Thank you, David. Don't ever do that again. That's unbelievable. Really, thank you very much, David. That is a real treat. You probably wouldn't believe what David said, but in fact, I don't know if it was my first, but one of my first articles I ever wrote was in 1969, a then obscure Israeli general came to the University of Minnesota Hillel House to speak. It was after the '67 war, and someone said this guy was really important and you should go hear him. He had been a big figure in the Six-Day War. I went to hear him. I wrote up his story. It was Ariel Sharon, and our lives were sort of interwoven ever since, something I reminded him of many, many years later. It's really good to be here with all the people who had 7 o'clock dinner reservations, and thank you. Thank you for your foresight. But it's a treat to be here. Walter, I compliment you. It's been an amazing couple of days that we've been here, and you've really pulled off something terrific. And Kitty, and hats off to all of the ASPEN Institute. So the title of my talk is Green is the New Red, White, and Blue. It's the subject of what I think is going to be my next book I've already started working on. And I guess it'll begin like this. My name is Tom Friedman, and I am a climate skeptic. That's right. Oh, I'm not a skeptic about global warming. That's happening. I'm a total skeptic that we're really doing anything about it. I think we're in the middle of a huge green bubble. There's a saying at the Pentagon that a vision without resources is a hallucination. And I think right now we're in the middle of a big green hallucination. The one thing this sort of green story reminds me of about parallel with the Middle East actually is a story I told probably here 10 years ago. A story about a religious Jew named Goldberg who wanted to win the lottery. Goldberg would go to synagogue every Saturday and say, "God, what would be so bad if I won the lottery? The lottery would come and Goldberg wouldn't win." Week after week, he would go to synagogue every Saturday. "God, what would be so bad if I won the lottery? The lottery would come and Goldberg wouldn't win." Finally, one Sabbath, Goldberg goes to the library and goes, "God, I've been such a pious Jew all my life. What do I have to do to win the lottery?" And the heavens parted and the voice of God came down. "Goldberg, give me a chance. Buy a ticket." That's how I feel really about this green issue. Oh, we're all talking about it and shrine to the heavens, but we really haven't bought a ticket. So let's get real for a second. When we talk about combating global warming, what are we talking about? We're talking about changing the weather. We're talking about changing the weather. It is, if we pull it off, it would be the biggest project mankind has ever undertaken since the Tower of Babel. We're talking about changing the weather. This is a huge scale project. What are we talking about in particular? We're talking about preventing the doubling of CO2 in the atmosphere from the pre-industrial age till the year 2050. Because the generally accepted climate science says if we go past the doubling of CO2 in the atmosphere, all the climate monsters will come out the door. And by the way, on the way to the doubling, a lot will come out. That's what that's what all this story is about. Well, what do we have to do to actually prevent the doubling of CO2 in the atmosphere between now and 2050? Nate Lewis, a chemist at Caltech who works a lot in the solar energy field, I think is a brilliant scholar. He can summarize it, reduce it to just a couple of numbers. In the year 2000, the year 2000, the world as a whole used roughly 13 terabits of electricity, of energy. That's 13 trillion watts. If we project between now and 2050, with China growing, India growing, our economy continuing to grow, by 2050 the world will use 26 terawatts of electricity, 26 trillion watts. What do we have to do if we're going to grow like that and allow China and India to grow dirty for a while till they're able to get clean? What do we actually have to do then if we want to prevent the doubling of CO2 in the atmosphere between now and 2050? Well, what Nate says we have to do, and this is within the general consensus of the climate scientists, we have to conserve as much energy as we are now using as a world, 13 trillion watts. We have to conserve that much. And we have to produce from clean, non-emitting, CO2-emitting sources almost another 13 trillion watts from clean power. That is the scale of the project that we are engaged in. That, my friends, is the truly inconvenient truth. And no one, it seems to me, or very few people, have actually been talking about the scale of what we need to do. We need to produce 13 trillion watts of clean power at scale at the China price, or at what my friend Vinod Khosla calls the Chindia price, the price at which it will scale in China and India. This is a huge industrial project. How do we do it? Well, I think to begin doing this, first of all, you obviously have to widen the coalition of people involved in this project. It cannot just be the ASPEN Ideas Festival. Obviously, it cannot just be an elites issue. And a lot of my own writing has been focused on how do we broaden the consensus of people to get them involved in this project. Now, I'm a big believer in what I do, that to name something is to own it. If you can name an issue, you can own an issue. The world is flat. My argument has been that for all these years, the people who actually named green, people who actually characterized green, were actually its opponents. And they named it liberal, tree-hugging, girly man, sissy, unpatriotic, vaguely French. Okay. Vaguely French. Okay. That was basically, if you were a green, 4 out of 5 people would associate those words with you. Now, the green movement, in my view, was equally complicit. They weren't sure if you were good enough to be green. No, Walter, not good enough, sorry. So for both of these reasons, this movement had a very hard time scaling politically. So what I've been trying to do is redefine green. redefine green as the most capitalistic, patriotic, geostrategic, pro-American, pro-growth, future-oriented thing you can do, be, or say. Green is the new red, white, and blue. Because unless we unbottle this idea and take it away from kind of the two extremes who defined it, you won't begin to get change. And my essential argument is that green is the answer to the three biggest issues facing us today, or three of the biggest: jobs, temperature, and terrorism. I think green is the answer for jobs, temperature, and terrorism. It's about how our kids compete in a flatter world, how they thrive in a warmer world, how they survive in a more dangerous world. I believe the answer to those three questions can actually be found in the concept green, or what I like to call geo-green, to distinguish it from the previous ideology. Now the good news, as is reflected by this Ideas Festival, as is reflected by the cover stories on so many magazines and newspapers, the good news is that green has gone Main Street. You cannot go into a newsstand, you cannot attend a function like this without panels about green. And that's a great thing. But green has not gone down Main Street at all, at the scale we need to prevent that doubling and to get these technologies down to the China price. Not even close. We haven't even begun to tackle that problem. 55% of our energy today still comes from coal, 20% from nuclear, 70% from natural gas, about 1.6 from wind and solar. Well, our energy use grew last year by 1.7%. So all that wind and solar just got eaten up last year. So green has gone Main Street, it hasn't gone down Main Street. Now why has green gone Main Street? I would argue three reasons: 9/11, Katrina, and the internet. Let me go through all three. 9/11 taught us that we're in a war. We're in a war on terrorism with people who are funded, fueled, and energized by our energy purchases. We are in the first war in American history, maybe in modern history, where we are funding both sides of the war. We fund the U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps with our tax dollars. We fund Al-Qaeda, Islamic Jihad, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the whole transformation of the Muslim world to the Wahhabite idea through our energy purchases. We're funding both sides of the war. How stupid is that? Okay. And I think since 9/11, people have understood that. But I would like to add a gloss. And again, why is green the solution here? And green is the solution because of what I like to call the first law of petropolitics. This is an idea I wrote about last year in Foreign Policy magazine. Now, the best way I can explain the first law of petropolitics, if I didn't have a screen here, but I should have, is what I did was I charted the price of oil, average price, from 1979 to 2005. Now, if you chart the average global price of oil from 1979 to 2005, what does your graph look like? It looks like a big V, okay? 1979, round numbers, oil was $70 a barrel. 1991 to 95, oil gets down to about $10 a barrel. Yes, with all due respect to Ronald Reagan, it was $10 a barrel oil that brought down the Soviet Union. People forget oil cratered when the Soviet Union cratered. And then oil goes back up 2005 to $70 a barrel. So that graph looks like this. Then what I did is I went to the Freedom House Freedom Index. Yeah, Freedom House, they actually index freedom in countries. Free and fair elections, newspapers, NGOs, political participation. And I overlaid the Freedom House Freedom Index on the oil price graph for 4 countries: Iran, Nigeria, Russia, and Venezuela. What does that look like? Well, the Freedom Index for these petrolist states, states highly dependent on oil for their GDP, looks like this. Oh, well, that's interesting. See, the price of oil looks like that, and the Freedom Index looks like that. What does that tell you? It tells you that the price of oil and the pace of freedom operate in an inverse correlation. As the price of oil went down from 1979, the pace of freedom went up in these countries. And as the price of oil went up, the pace of freedom went down. Now, of course, you know this anecdotally. When oil was $30 a barrel, President Bush looked into Vladimir Putin's soul and saw a good man down there. You look into Putin's soul at $70, you'll see Gazprom, Lukos, Izvestia, Pravda, every institution and newspaper he has swallowed with $70 a barrel oil. When oil was $30 a barrel, Iran elected Khatami as president, who called for a dialogue of civilizations. When oil was $70 a barrel, they elected Ahmadinejad, who said Israel should be wiped off the map and the Holocaust was a myth. One thing I can promise you folks, at $20 a barrel, the Holocaust will not be a myth. That's nonsense you can only afford at $70 a barrel. Okay. Which was the first Arab Gulf country to discover oil? Bahrain, tiny island state off the east coast of Saudi Arabia. Which was the first Arab Gulf country to run out of oil? Bahrain. Which was the first Arab Gulf country to hold a free and fair election where women could run and vote? Bahrain. Which was the first Arab Gulf country to sign a free trade agreement with the United States? Bahrain. Which was the first Arab Gulf country to hire McKinsey to come in and revamp their labor laws because their people were going to have to work? Say it with me now. Bahrain, okay? Oh, that's not an accident. That's the price of oil and the pace of freedom operating in an inverse correlation. You want to know what plan B is for Iraq? Bring down the price of oil. The motto of our revolution was no taxation without representation. The motto of the petrolist dictator is no representation without taxation. Hey, pal, if I don't have to tax you, I don't have to represent you. So green is actually the most geostrategic thing we could be doing now, I believe, to promote the reform agenda in the Middle East, and by the way, to deal with Iran. I was in Moscow a few months ago, gave part of this talk at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow to a group of academics, made the point that it was $10 barrel oil that brought down the Soviet Union. Afterwards, I went up to Vladimir Mao, one of their leading economists. I said, Vladimir, I'm right, wasn't I? $10 a barrel brought down the Soviet Union. He said, no, Tom, you're wrong. It was $80 a barrel oil, followed by $10 a barrel oil, that brought down the Soviet Union. And I promise you, friends, I promise you that $20 a barrel oil following $80 barrel oil will bring down the Iranian mullahs, or it will transform Iran. Okay. So anyone who thinks, two just short numbers. Iran in 2005 earned $44 billion from oil exports, which were 80% of government receipts. The rest were carpets and pistachios, all right? Iran in 2005 spent $25 billion on subsidies of food, housing, education, cheap gasoline, which they're now paying for. What does that mean? That means if you brought the price of oil down back to around $40 a barrel, Iran's entire budget would go to subsidies. There's an economic term for that, unsustainable. It is unsustainable. So green is hugely geostrategic. In fact, I would argue it's the most geostrategic thing we could do today. Second reason green has gone Main Street, and I'm not going to dwell on this because John Doors, I think, talked about it so excellently beforehand, is the whole climate issue, Katrina, whatnot. We all know, I believe we all know, the climate is changing. And green obviously is the answer for that clean, non-emitting power. Third reason green's gone Main Street, though, has to do with what I call the flattening of the world. Because what the flattening of the world has done is brought 3 billion new consumers onto the global economic playing field, all with their own version of the American dream: a house, a car, a toaster, a microwave, and a refrigerator. If we don't find a cleaner, greener way to power their dreams, we are going to burn up, choke up, heat up, and smoke up this planet so much faster than anyone realizes when it's flat, as opposed to when it was round. The world has never seen 3 billion people, and God bless them, move from low-impact energy and environmental lifestyles to high-impact energy environmental lifestyles in this short period of time. So the flattening of the world makes green hugely important, both economically and obviously in terms of climate. The flattening of the world also is stimulating a huge competition. Competition in the retail space between Walmart and Costco and Tosco and Kmart and Target. And that competition, that intense competition over every penny, is making companies like Walmart discover green as a whole new competitive edge. They're discovering that dirty is waste, and waste means higher prices, and higher prices in a flat world means you get creamed economically. So the flattening of the world is actually driving green in that way as well. The most important way the flattening of the world is driving green, though, is, I believe, this is the foundation of the next great industrial revolution: green, clean power, for one very simple reason. You cannot make a product greener without making it smarter. You cannot make a toaster, a microwave, a car greener without making it smarter. What do we still manufacture in this country? We manufacture things that are smart, that have a lot of knowledge embedded in them. What do they make in China and India? Well, they're now focused on making things that are cheaper. What does that mean? That means to the extent that we shift the whole global debate to green, to making green part of the DNA of every product, we shift the whole global economy toward jobs that are much more difficult to outsource. We shift it from dumb jobs to knowledge jobs. Now, the best example I can give you of this is Erie, Pennsylvania. Erie, Pennsylvania, in the heart of the American Rust Belt, today has a trade surplus with China and Mexico. Well, how could that be? Erie, Pennsylvania? Are you sure, Tom? Yes, I'm sure. It's all because of one company, GE Transportation, which has 4,500 employees in Erie, Pennsylvania. And what does GE Transportation make with its 4,500 engineers who make almost twice the average wages in Erie? GE Transportation makes choo-choo trains. It makes locomotives, okay? And it sells locomotives to a locomotive train country called China. Why? Because on a total ton-pulled basis, GE's locomotives are so smart and so energy efficient, even though China sells its locomotives for 30% less, it's more efficient for China to import locomotives from GE Transportation. You can't make a product greener without making it smarter. So when I hear people say, we can't afford to be green, that's utter lunacy. We can't afford not to be green, because the next great pool of manufacturing jobs are going to be green, smart jobs. Mom, Dad, tell your kids anything green is going to have a good upper middle class job associated with it. So those are the main reasons, I would argue, that green has gone Main Street. People see all that. But why hasn't it gone down Main Street? And it really hasn't. We haven't made any real inroads on this huge scale project. Well, the reason it hasn't gone down Main Street is really very simple. And yes, I do like to simplify things. Especially when people make them more complicated than they need to be. And the reason green hasn't gone down Main Street is because to get down Main Street, how do you have a revolution at scale? You take capital and you connect it to new technology. Capital and new technology. That's what the IT revolution was all about. It was capital with new technology. But the green revolution is different from the IT revolution. Because the green revolution needs government policy in the middle to connect capital and technology at scale. And where the huge roadblock is. People say we need to drill for oil in Detroit. No, no, no. We need to drill for oil in Washington, D.C. All right? Because the biggest impediment to a real green revolution today is the Congress, both parties, okay? And Washington, D.C., starting with the White House. We are not connecting, that's okay, it's not crossfire, it's late. We are not connecting capital with technology at scale, and this is a scale game. People write me all the time, come see my hot air balloon, it turns a wheel, it milks a cow, it produces clean methane. I love you, okay? But it's not going to happen at scale without that thing called policy in between. Why is that? Has to do with the very unique nature of the project we're engaged in. And again, Nate Lewis taught me this. Let's say I invented the first cell phone. A phone you could carry in your pocket. I came to my friend David Bradley. I said, David, I have a phone you can carry in your pocket. He says, Tom, I'll take 10. That phone, a phone I could carry in my pocket, that would change my life. I'll take 10. I say, David, they're going to cost $1,000 each. He says, no problem. That would change my life. I sell 10 to David, 10 to John, 10 to Walter, 10 to all the folks up here. I take all that money. I come back 6 months later. I say, David, remember that cell phone? Now I got one. Only costs $900. Smaller, better range. I moved down the innovation curve. Now I'm on a roll. A couple years later, I come back to my friend David. I say, David, remember that cell phone I sold you? I got something else now. See that light up there? I'm going to power that light with solar power. David says to me, Tom, that cell phone you sold me, that changed my life. You may have not noticed, I already have light. I really don't care where the electrons come from. That's the problem here, folks. As Nate says, people say this is a moonshot. The energy revolution's like a moonshot. Yeah, it's like a moonshot when Southwest Airlines already flies to the moon and gives away free peanuts. David Bradley already has cheap light. So unless the government, the policy thing in between capital and technology comes along and says, David, from now on you are going to have to pay $110 a month for that light because you're going to pay for the CO2 it's emitting in the atmosphere. Then when I come along and say, David, I've got a solar light for 100, he says, I'll take 10. And I sell 10 to him and 10 to Walter and 10 to John, and I take all that money. I come back 6 months later with a solar light for $90. That's how you get scale at the China price. And what's not happening today, folks, is that policy change in the middle. Did you follow the energy debate in the Senate 2 weeks ago? Well, they finally twisted enough arms that we will now finally, after 32 years, have new CAFE mileage standards. Are you ready? Have you fastened your seatbelts? That by the year 2020 will bring us almost to where Europe is today. Oh, thank you. All the other stuff, renewable portfolio mandates for every state, 23 of them already have, but it would be nice if they were a federal mandate, killed. Higher taxes for the oil companies, we could use the money for renewable power, killed. Because, you know that space called policy? You're not in it. Oh, no, no. You don't have a clue what's going on there. That's dominated by legacy industries and professional lobbyists. And that is why, friends, we don't have green policy in this country to this day. Despite all the hype, we have green politics. Green politics is that the Iowa folks are for ethanol, and the Illinois delegation is for coal, and the Michigan delegation's for assisted suicide. Don't touch the auto industry, okay? We have green politics in this country. We do not have green policy. And the first way, the only way you're going to get change at scale is when you unlock that policy. Another thing we obviously need is infrastructure. We need a whole new, when the IT revolution happened, you remember all you had to do was plug in, take out that phone thing and plug it into your computer. And suddenly you were part of the IT revolution. For the green revolution, you need a whole new infrastructure. Oh, it's great that there's solar energy in this spot and there's wind there. But you may have noticed the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow unless you have a national transmission grid that can get the solar and wind power when and where it blows to the places where it's needed. You have nothing. You have no scale. You have a nice little boutique industries. And right now, we got nice little boutique industries. Third thing we need is we need the infrastructure to make every individual not a PC, but what I call a PEC, a personal energy consumer. So everyone knows how much energy they're using. When we get our daughter's cell phone bill, we know every phone call she's made to her boyfriend, every single one, down to the last penny. When we get our energy bill, just one number, I have no idea whether it's my pool, my refrigerator, my toaster, my oven. You get a dumb bill. How can you begin to change at scale unless we are all PEC's personal energy consumers? Ditto for every CEO. Every CEO has to be a chief energy officer. Oh, we went through this during the IT revolution. The CEOs got it during the IT revolution. They said, somebody get me an IT guy. Somebody get me an IT gal, somebody who knows IT. They'll handle it. Then eventually the light went on that IT, information, had to go into everything you did, from human resources to manufacturing to inventory. Same with the E in CEO. Every CEO needs to be thinking about how that E goes into everything he or she manufactures. So those are the kinds of fundamental structural changes we need to get clean power at scale. And unless I'm missing something, none of it's happening. So you'll pardon me. You'll pardon me when I hear people say, we're in the midst of a green revolution. Oh, a green revolution. You ever study a revolution in history? You ever seen a revolution in history where nobody got hurt? That's the green revolution. In the green revolution, nobody gets hurt. We're all winners. We're all winners, yeah. Exxon's green. They give $100 million to Stanford. They also gave millions to crank scientists to confuse us about climate change, but they're green. GM's green. They put those little caps, on the oil thing. Of course, they don't tell you that they cut a deal with Congress that allows them actually to put phony mileage numbers in terms of their compliance with mileage standards on a Suburban in return for putting a $45 chip into your car so it can take ethanol. but GM's green. Yeah, they're green. Dick Cheney's green. He's for alternative fuels. Yeah, he's for liquefied coal. Dick Cheney's green. We're all green now. Welcome to the green revolution where nobody gets hurt. Yeah. This isn't a green revolution, friends. This is a party. We're having a green party. It's a lot of fun. Oh, I got to tell you, I get a lot of fun, going around talking about it. But it's a party. My teacher and friend, Michael Sandel, says to me, Tom, you'll know when there's a green revolution, when you see real green politics. And real politics is competing interests, winners and losers. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, we all talked here about the IT revolution. Do you think that was pain-free? Ask the folks at Data General if the IT revolution was pain-free. Oh, everyone wasn't a winner in the IT revolution. There are a lot of old legacy industries that didn't get it, and they got steamrolled. And ladies and gentlemen, today, the old legacy industries, they control this story. They control that policy mechanism in Washington. They are tough, and they will fight dirty. They are not going anywhere. And that's why we're having a green party, not a green revolution. Do not kid yourself for 1 second. Let me simply end by saying this, that, the hallmark of companies and countries that thrive throughout changes is that they reinvent themselves. We reinvented ourselves from a continental industrial power in the 19th century to a global industrial power in the 20th century. We need to now reinvent ourselves as a global clean power in the 21st century. Because I have this intuition, it's just an intuition, that we're not post-something anymore. We're not post-Cold War. We're not post-Cold War. We're pre-something right now. We are pre-something. And what we're pre is the climate era. I don't even know what that means, okay? But I have an intuition, if we don't reinvent ourselves, it's going to mean something really harsh. That we will not have a free world if over time we don't have a carbon-free world. The choices that our kids will have will be so much more constricted that we will not have a free world if we don't have a carbon-free world. But here's the really hard thing. The really hard thing is that most political issues, you get change when people like you all, me, go into the streets, write articles, hang placards, protest. Politicians see them, hear them, change laws. The problem with this green story is the people most affected haven't been born yet. The people most aggrieved, who will be aggrieved, have not been born yet. And that means we have this really unusual challenge of stewardship. We have to act at scale with real sacrifice, real taxes, real things that produce a revolution, not a party. And we have to do it to prevent a gas that you cannot see, smell, or touch on behalf of a generation that has not been born yet. It will be, if we do it, the greatest act of stewardship in our history. Our parents did that for us in World War II. That's why we called them the greatest generation. Our children will only call us the greatest generation if we are really, truly the greenest generation. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.